okay, environment's one thing, we have behavior on the other side. And in my experience, there are lots of parents that come in at like that toddler zone, or maybe their kid is 4 or 5, and they haven't ever been able to sleep well. And they tell me, like, I think it's too late for me. So tell me, is it ever too late to get your child on a sleep schedule that will help them to get quality sleep or to help them have more quality sleep if they are on a good schedule?
It Yes, it is never too late. So I always say, even in adulthood, right? So some of us have had poor sleep for many, many years, and then we're adults, and those habits can perpetuate, and the sleep dysfunction can perpetuate. Yes, it's never too late to kind of change your sleep routine, change your sleep hygiene, and change your approach to getting good quality sleep for you or for your child.
hmm Yeah, I think that's an important point because I think that as parents, we start to feel so guilty. Like, I've done this to my child. Now it's too late. They're never going to be a good sleeper. Oh, well, I just have these behavioral issues. One thing always on the parent side that I'm always preaching, for lack of a better word, is about what you're doing for yourself so that you have the bandwidth to be able, once you decide, hey, I want to set things up in a way that's going to be more conducive to quality sleep, to be able to actually put that into practice, because it takes a while, right, for these habits to kind of take effect. It's not going to be overnight. Like, if you put your child to bed without you with them or without all these kind of sleep crutches, it's not like it's going to be an overnight thing for them to have quality sleep. It takes a little bit of effort, right?
So true. It's like everything with our health. It's like eating right, exercise, all of those core pillars of good health. They take time, they take effort. So you really have to put the effort into sleep. And I think of sleep as a pillar that not only supports overall health, but also supports those other two things, eating right and exercise. Because if you're not getting the sleep that you need, there are various biological mechanisms by which it becomes harder to eat what you should be eating. And it becomes harder to have the motivation to actually go out there and do exercise and energy to go out there and get the exercise that you need. So yes, sleep takes effort, but once you put that effort in and you're consistent and persistent with those efforts, usually there are improvements, both for yourself and for your children. But it's that consistency part that's so hard. Just like any behavioral change, it's so hard to be really consistent about it. But you really have to look at that end goal and keep working for that end goal. Yes, the
Yeah,
work
totally.
usually is worth it at the end.
Okay, so let's say people say, I definitely want to make a change. I want to try to get really quality sleep for my kids. Now I'm sold on the idea that behaviorally it could really help. Let's start with, how much sleep does the average child need at different ages? Keeping in mind that, of course, every single child is different. So these are just
Yeah.
guidelines.
Yes, yes. So there are broad ranges, and we actually, normative data is surprisingly hard to get based on the population you're looking at, et cetera. But there was a study that was done, and this was in some of the Scandinavian countries, and they looked at the total amount of sleep from infants all the way out to adolescents. And so when it comes to infants, 1 month olds, the range here, and again, it depends on how far we look at percentiles, 9 hours in a 24-hour period, all the way up to about 18 to 19 hours in a 24-hour period. That was the range. If you look between second percentile and 98th percentile. So pretty wide range. But overall, by the time you're about 1 year of age, on average, it's around 14 hours in a 24-hour period. That's inclusive of naps. As you get older, your sleep need decreases. By the time you're hitting adolescence, we're thinking around 8.5 to 10 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. And by the time you're an adult, it usually is between 7 to 9 hours. And yes, you have short sleepers and you have long sleepers, but 7 to 9 hours for the vast majority of adults.
Okay. And then they're going to try to get those sleep environments right as much as possible, or as much conducive as possible to sleep. But then the other thing I know in parents' minds is about screens. Tell us about how screen use during the day and screen use close to bedtime, how do those affect quality sleep? And what are some principles that maybe parents can use to help to limit screens a little bit so that it won't affect sleep?
Sure. This is one of the interesting areas where we are learning a lot more, and some of the opinions are actually changing. So before we would say, particularly for adults, we'd say, you shouldn't have a screen in bed. It's going to disrupt your sleep. And there's some data coming out now that it may not be as disruptive as we initially thought. However, there's a lot of data for children that shows that the number of screens you have, the type of content you're consuming, yes, it can have a negative impact on the quantity and quality of your sleep. So for children, I still say you really want to try to minimize screen time for 30 minutes prior to bed. And there are many reasons for this. One is that just the light exposure itself, depending on how bright that light is, we think it's activating, but two, it can also decrease your natural melatonin secretion or delay that melatonin secretion. So for adolescents who are naturally predisposed to being night owls, that light at nighttime tells them, hey, it's still daytime, go to bed even later than you typically do. So that can perpetuate a kind of a bad habit. But two, the type of content that we're consuming now is just so engaging and so activating, when it comes to social media, when it comes to videos, that it's very hard to put down. And it's really kind of just the milieu that's created in your brain with neurochemistry, including norepinephrine and dopamine, are not the ones that are conducive for sleep. And so for all those reasons, I like to give them at least a 20 or 30-minute break when their routine starts, where they should try to be electronic and screen-free for children.
Absolutely. Although I am excited about, for adults, maybe it's not quite so bad for some of us.
Maybe. We're still...
maybe. I will say this. You know what's the worst for me is the morning screen time. What I have to do, what I have had to learn how to do is to not check my phone first thing when I wake up in the morning. It's the having an old school alarm so that way I'm not needing my phone to be able to wake up. And then go have my coffee, go take my 5 minutes to journal or take a shower or whatever. And then I can get into the day and what I need to do. Because otherwise it just starts you on that
That's right.
mode of
It's
being
so
anxious. Yeah, totally. All right. What about melatonin? This is a huge one. Who is it okay for? How should we be thinking about melatonin? What are the big risks? Tell me what your philosophy is on using melatonin.
Sure. I always think of melatonin as a time-shifting medication, not necessarily a sleep-inducing medication / supplement. So when I say time-shifting, it's great for telling your body clock, your circadian rhythm, where it should be. And it's great for moving that circadian rhythm earlier. And so we have great data to support its use for circadian rhythm disorders in which you're trying to adjust your internal body clock. So that includes teenagers that have what we call delayed sleep-wake phase syndrome, where they're going to bed way too late because their brain naturally can't fall asleep until much later, and they want to sleep in until noon and 1 o'clock, and that's not conducive with the school schedule. That's a situation where melatonin, working with your pediatrician, may help. We know that shift work and jet lag are two other situations where the timing of melatonin can help, again, with the guidance of a physician. And there are special populations amongst our pediatric population where, for example, children that have a history of autism, we know that melatonin can help as a baseline sleep helping medication or supplement. Children with ADHD, there's data to support that might be helpful for some of them as well to help them get to sleep. But for the otherwise healthy child that doesn't have any other underlying comorbid neurologic issues or concerns, typically melatonin is not indicated. So it's an easy kind of go-to Band-Aid, but long-term, usually the solutions are behavioral in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one child on melatonin. She has autism, so she uses melatonin on a regular basis. My other child, I've had to do the hard work of doing some of those behavioral shifts, making sure she gets enough exercise during the day, making sure she's not just right with the screen all day long, making sure that she's getting healthy food during the day so that then she can sleep, and making sure those sleep hygiene parts are in place, making sure that she has a little bedtime routine, making sure that I'm lying there reading a book next to her. My philosophy is too, again, with kind of the bandwidth of parents, I always stop to think what are the trade-offs and the benefits? I know that for my autistic child, the trade-off of her not having the melatonin is no sleep all night long and more behavioral issues the next day. I know that for my other child, if I can invest that time with her, reading the books, being with her a little bit before bed, getting that sleep routine with her, not sleeping in the bed with her, but getting those little routines going, that pays off with less behavioral issues the next day. So I think you and I probably both really agree on this idea of paying attention to your individual child. What do they need when it comes to sleep? But then also, what do they need when it comes to all the things in their life? And really being a scientist, trying to observe and kind of collect the data yourself to say, did this work or did this make it a little bit more difficult?
Yes. And you've touched on a great point, which is, every child is so different. And so families sometimes are blessed with a wonderful sleeper as their first child, and they think that they've done everything right. And the second child shows up and drop kicks them in the face. And they're like, I thought we were doing everything. And they're just naturally, some children are naturally more difficult when it comes to their sleep drive and sleep need, et cetera. And so, yes, every child is different. Even identical twins, right? They're going to have some differences when it comes to their sleep and their nature, et cetera. So you have to be cautious. You can't apply kind of one thing to all children in the family, and have to really make sure we kind of nuance the discussion.